It's been said that fiction is a projection of reality, that it's simply the conjuring of a novelist who expresses our deepest fears, ambitions, beliefs, and ideas into a tangible form, such as a book or film. The art of a period is usually a reflection of the period itself, and novelists routinely draw from real places, real events, real facts, and real issues of the day. But what if they drew from real people? Take your own life, for instance. Your life could easily be retold as anything from a comic book to a 19th century adventure film. Paintings, sculptures, songs, the works. Over and over again, the story of you is told. And as long as the context and settings were different enough from previous retellings, no one would notice. Well, almost no one. There are some who have noticed a pattern too frequent to be accident, too consistent to be coincidence, and too prevalent to ignore. A reoccurring theme, increasingly willing to unveil itself. The symbolism in question is that of a secret society known as the Illuminati, a group associated with black magic, Satanism, and believed by many to be behind much of humanity's bloody past and its ominous future. A group who commonly uses eyes, pyramids, suns, and snakes in its symbolism, and not shy about drawing imagery from the Bible and Egyptian mythology either. But to discover these symbols' meaning is hopeless by analyzing a single retelling. With the context and the window of the timeline having been altered, it's difficult to discover which parts of the retelling are literal, which are symbolic, and which ones were simply added to tweak the story far enough away from previous retellings. But if we instead concern ourselves with only the overlapping aspects of these stories, the meaning surrounding this symbolism becomes clearer. There is hardly a single soul who hasn't entertained the thought that Hollywood might be running out of stories. But maybe they're not running out of stories. Maybe they're running out of ways of telling the same story. Because if you were telling the life of just a few people repeatedly, that's exactly what would happen. When looking for the most blatant use of Masonic and Illuminist symbolism, one need only see The Man Who Would Be King. The Man Who Would Be King was released in 1975, but the short story that it's based on was written in 1888 by Rudyard Kipling. It's a story of two vagabond Englishmen, Peachy and Danny, played by Michael Caine and Sean Connery, who are considered to be criminals by the British Empire. So they hatch a plan to travel to a distant, primitive country intending on becoming kings and returning with all that country's treasure. After a long, perilous journey, they arrive to Kafiristan and initially met with hostility, but are slowly accepted as heroes as they conquer quote-unquote devils and people in neighboring villages. Eventually, Danny, played by Sean Connery, is mistaken for a divine being when a charm adorned with the Masonic compass and all-seeing eye is discovered around his neck. He rules all of Kafiristan for a short time. He also violates the contract he signed before arriving by taking a wife. Soon he begins to believe the lie that he's a god, and disaster befalls his kingdom. Peachy, played by Michael Caine, decides to take his half of the gold and return to England. But before he can, Danny is bitten at his wedding and revealed to be only human when he's seen bleeding. Eventually they're punished. Danny thrown into a canyon, and Peachy scarred and suffered for 1,000 years. This movie has parallels with the story of the Antichrist in both Christian and Islamic tradition. A man arrives claiming to be God, survives a fatal injury, performs false miracles, and eventually punished by being thrown into a pit. Even 7 trumpets are heard in the movie, while in the Bible, 7 trumpets signal 7 phases of the apocalypse. And the Muslims say the Antichrist will arrive out of Kafiristan, the same country mentioned in the movie. The Man Who Would Be King has an additional similarity when compared to the apocryphal Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch's primary focus is the fallen angels from the Garden of Eden. The Book of Enoch contains 2 characters, Tamiaza and Azazel, which are listed among the leaders, and sound quite a bit like Danny and Peachy from the movie. In both cases, the 2 sign a contract and receive a gift that will make humans tremble. Both taught people how to make weapons and conduct themselves in war. And, just like in the Book of Enoch, Azazel is thrown into a pit in the middle of a desert, while his associate Tamiaza is burned. And similar to the serpent from the Garden of Eden, Danny tells the woman that she surely won't die, and then later is bruised in the face by her. Exactly like the serpent from the book of Genesis, who tells Eve she won't die if she tastes the fruit, and then later, the serpent is told that the woman will one day bruise his face. One of the Man Who Would Be King's most blatant retellings can be found in Stargate. Stargate is about an ancient portal found in the desert. A group of soldiers who walk through the portal arrive to another world that resembles ancient Egypt. When they arrive, one of the group's members, Danny, played by James Spader, is discovered wearing a charm with the all-seeing eye and soon learns that the local people have mistaken him for a representative of the Egyptian sun god Ra. Soon, the real Ra learns of the group's presence and begins to kill and capture them one by one, including Daniel, who is brought back to life by Ra. Eventually, the few remaining soldiers kill Ra and free the local people from his tyranny. Danny, the group's archaeologist, decides to take a wife and remain with the primitive people as a leader while his comrades return home. The similarities between Stargate and the Man Who Would Be King are too specific to be accident. Both have the same name.
Daniel. I'm Daniel.
And brother Daniel Dravert, which is I.
Both were given a charm with the all-seeing eye on it before departure.
I have something for you.
Take this.
Both were mistaken for divine beings when discovered with the charm.
The Eye of Ra. It's the Egyptian sun god. They think he sent us here.
That's what saved us.
Blimey. You think I'm a god?
Both tried to be culturally sensitive.
I don't think we should eat any food here.
I don't know, they might consider that an insult.
You dirty old brute.
Different countries, different customs. Mustn't be prejudiced, Peachy.
Well, we don't want to offend them now, do we, Daniel?
Bloody heathens. Different countries, different customs. Mustn't be prejudiced, Danny.
Both include a scene where the slave girl is rejected.
No. You don't have to do that.
Now wait a minute, Ducks.
Daniel from The Man Who Would Be King survives a seemingly fatal wound, while Daniel from Stargate suffers a fatal wound and is brought back to life. Both decide to stay and take a local for a wife, while his partner insists on going back home.
Yes, I'm sure.
You gonna be all right?
I'm gonna be all right.
I ain't going, Peachy. What?
You heard me.
The two movies even contain similar scenes in landscape. The Road to El Dorado is another veiled retelling of The Man Who Would Be King, with even more Stargate had to offer. The Road to El Dorado is about two guys considered criminals by the Spanish Empire. But before the two are punished and imprisoned, they escape the transport boat and arrive by sea to a primitive land. Using a map as a guide, the two hatch a plan involving plunder of El Dorado, the city of gold. When the two arrive in El Dorado, they are mistaken for divine beings after performing a false miracle. They become the immediate rulers of El Dorado, the lost city of gold, and their plan to steal the city's gold moves forward with ease. But, similar to Danny from The Man Who Would Be King, one of the two quote-unquote gods is seen bleeding, and it becomes evident to the city's high priest that they aren't gods, but human. The high priest attempts to kill the two would-be kings, but fails and is himself killed. One of the two gentlemen, Michael, who is mistaken for the sun god, wants to stay and rule the primitive country, while the other, Tulio, wants to go back home with his half of the gold.